Poorva and I'm talking to Sreeja Iyer, founder and CEO of Sparkling Mindz Global School and Preschool today. And we are talking about the school's vision and I think about change making. So, ma'am, I know and that the vision of the school is inspiring confident learners and change makers. Now, this is a very unique vision. Like I've heard schools have mottos and missions like perseverance, excellence, faith in God. Like my school's motto was faith in God. So this is a very unique vision. Can you tell us what it stands for?
So when we were thinking about what should the school or the organization, which is Sparkling Mindz, stand for, we were very clear that it needs to stand for something for the child. Right? And it's about inspiring confident learners and change makers. So each of those words individually stands for something. So if you're looking at this child becoming future ready, the first and the most important thing is internal inspiration, motivation for the child to actually feel like they can do something in this world, they can take on a problem, right? That inspiration is a very key thing, and this inspiration is internally driven. It is not about something that others are doing or something that others need to do for you. The confidence again ensures that the child who is feeling inspired is able to do something in an area of their choice. And the learners and change makers, both of it put together, actually it's a very unique history. So first we used to only say learners, and the intention was for the children to actually focus on the learning, because that's what is under your control, not the output. And the more you are an inspired, confident learner, the more you can drive the kind of output that you want to drive. And then the question, I think about 3-4 years ago, question came about, what is this output that we want to drive? Is there a better definition for this output?
You mean the output from the learning that a confident child
who is also inspired.
So if the child is inspired, they're confident to take some action and they're learning, and what comes out of the learning.
Yes. And should that be completely open-ended, or is there a possibility that could be defined for that? And the whole community actually came together to think through this process, and it was very clear that each of this child who's actually in an inspiring space and is confident as learner should not be going and plugging into the world mindlessly. Okay, and that's very, very important, because in today's world our children are sitting on unprecedented global challenges, whereas in personal lives they're experiencing unprecedented abundance. Okay, so they are.
Can you just explain that a little bit? Like, what are the challenges that are in the outside world, and how come, if there are so many challenges, but how come you're saying that we are living in abundance?
Right, and this dichotomy is what the children are struggling with, right? So there is constant call for climate change related issues that is coming up, right? Children, every other minute, either somebody is being hurt in some way, or is exploited for their vulnerability, right? Women, minorities. There is also this whole thing about what kind of beliefs that somebody should be growing up with, which is being imposed on people, right? A very narrow view of what somebody should or shouldn't look like, be, etc., being spread through different kinds of media that children have access to. There is also this whole context of what kind of food and practices children actually get engaged with, and what they think is healthy, what they crave for on a day-to-day basis, which is actually creating lifestyle health related issues, right? And most of these are sitting at second, third order related issues. Like the first time you bite in a burger, you just experience, wow, this just melt in your mouth cheese, right? The first time you experience social media, there's this high of somebody is liking my post, and I'm able to post my beautiful pictures, and there are other people posting beautiful pictures. The first time you're engaging with a story, a fairy tale, you're just like, oh, everybody reads bedtime stories, and I'm reading fairy tale. The first time,
maybe I'll have a Prince Charming.
Exactly, and the beautiful dresses and gowns, or the boys having valor and going for dishum, right? And then there is this and media, the TV media also, which is actually supporting film and media that is supporting this. And then every time I'm actually using and unwrapping an Amazon package, the high is about opening the package. Nobody's worrying about the material with which this package is made, which is going to end up in landfills. These landfills are not visible to our children. The child vulnerability, the vulnerability of the child which gets exposed, and how children get exploited for encountering the social media in a naive space is not visible to our children unless somebody falls for it. And when somebody does fall for it and goes through depression or body shaming or issues, it is hushed. Right? It is not explicitly shared in the community. So children don't know that this caused that. That conversation is not happening, and hence the second order effect. Every time somebody is actually listening to a story and dreaming of this happily ever after, they are not told that there is no such thing as happily ever. There is only happily built after. Built as happily ever after, right? That's not being talked about. So what is not being talked about is not visible to our children, but they have increasing access to media, to books, to technology, to education. Even in the poorest of communities, they have access to this. But what they have access to is not built on the widest, most empathetic frame for a child to grow up and be most empowered. Right? So, change making or thinking about change is not coming naturally to these children, despite the fact that we're sitting on so many global challenges. They are sitting on abundance, and it's in that space of abundance that one can create. But it is that space that one has the least amount of intention and felt need, desire need to create. Because we are not in a perceived crisis. We are not in war. We are not in a place where mayhem is outside, right? Everything seems
or like on a day-to-day basis, we are not facing any direct consequence in our life. That's what you mean by we're living in an abundance. But there are these problems happening. So how do we bridge this dichotomy for our children?
Exactly. And that became a motto for the school and for Sparkling Mindz in general, right? To think about change making as something that we want to add to the entire vision, right? So it's inspiring confident learners and change makers. They'll continue to be confident learners and inspiring for themselves, for others. Yeah. But the intention of all of this is so that they go and plug into any system, any company, any work, any career path that they choose as thinking creators, as change makers, and not mindless consumers, which is exactly where in abundance our children are being driven towards mindless consumption today. It is not what we want. Right? And that's what the motto actually stands for.
Right. So that's wonderful. It makes a lot of sense. And so I'm wondering that how does the school make sure that children are, from what you're saying, it looks like it's not like they're studying or they're learning, so to say, about change making, and then they will pass out of school and then become a change maker or have a career. It's looking like something that is related to their life today. So how does that happen? Like, how does the school or how do the children do this change making now in their lives?
This is such an interesting question. Okay, when we put the change making into our vision, it was again a question that the community and the children and the team had, right? What does it mean? Are we preparing them for change making, or are they change makers today? And I think they're change makers today because these problems are real for them today. Do you think these problems are going to wait that, oh, you pass out of school and then I will come and knock on your door? No. In fact, most of these problems with respect to child vulnerability and the stories and practices and self-empowerment related issues that people face later on in life was embedded in them for the 16-20 years that they actually did the education and schooling, and that work didn't happen. In fact, it is not even passively that the work didn't happen. Actively you're discouraged from doing that work, right? There is shaming associated with identities or gender exploration. There is shaming associated with how you think about money. There is narrowness associated with, okay, science is only this and history is only that, right? That stories have to be like this, right? And it is everywhere. So it gets embedded so deeply in the child, there is no space for exploration. Then suddenly when they reach an adult, you can't expect that they will explore. Right? Some people do go through catharsis and start exploring and doing more. And the most common thing that I've heard from people is that, I turned out to be okay. Right? That I turned out to be okay means what? Right? For us it means that when the child is actually being educated, right, maybe they were questions that went unanswered, right? The child didn't build a muscle for asking questions either, and the whole validation came from outside. What the society thinks is okay. So I turned out to be okay from an external frame. You see, here I am, I'm running a company, I found my passion, I did this, I did that. But there is still areas of you, which you've not questioned, which you've not challenged, which you've not accepted, which, if you go deep down into, will look like a cave.
Are you saying we might bury a lot of it? So it's like, okay, I look okay from society says I look okay, but do I feel okay?
Right. And is that the goal of education, for somebody to turn out okay? Right? Who agreed to that outcome, right? And that's something that we are very, carefully managing for the children, that there needs to be a scope of that okay, right? Which comes from internal space making, right? So I will make mistakes, right? And I will learn how to deal with that. I will try to do projects, moonshot projects that I may not be able to access, and I learn how to work towards that, right? In that process, I will build skills.
Okay, so when you're saying children are working on change making, it's what I'm getting is that they're learning to work with themselves, question, not bury, be empowered in that sense. And you were just saying that there are some skills.
Yes.
So what are these skills that a child could learn if they have to do change making?
This is amazing, right? So many times people think that, this project's extracurricular is so different from academics, but for us it's a very integrated space, and if you look at it, it is, right? So when children have to understand a problem, they have to first do research, right? To really get to it, and the research involves questions, really going to digital technology from an active space of involvement and engagement, analysis, thinking about what is the source saying, which source to use, what for, which is a very active 21st century skill, right? Then putting it in a way that somebody will understand, right? The presentation literacy is also very 21st century skills, because it involves the child interfacing with technology of different forms, video, right? Presentation, newer types of presentations, and playing with it to actually be able to express their ideas in poetry, in story, in fables, in 100 different forms that they can actually showcase. Now, what are they showcasing? They're showcasing something that's meaningful to them, that touches their heart, right? So, these change-making ideas that children come up with come from within them. So we actually help them amplify the dissonance many a times that they feel in their lives, and it's not like our children's abundant lives are not being touched by any of these issues, okay? Once in a while, a little smell from that nearest landfill wafts into our air, and our children are like, gee, what is this stink, right? Once in a while, they get reports and pictures of, large stacks of landfills with plastic debris, right? Once in a while, they get to hear about animals in sea and sea debris filled with plastic, right? And they do get disturbed, right? But they learn to bury the disturbance instead of doing something about it. We learn to unearth, we teach them how to unearth that dissonance, unearth that disturbance, and talk and discuss about it, right? When children have parents fighting at home, right? Their myth of happily ever after shatters, right? And generally what happens is it becomes an insecurity that again children bury. Instead we unearth that dissonance and we're like, what does it mean when adults fight, right? And how does it affect you as a child? And how should you look at it or work with it or move it forward, right? And why do adults fight, right? So all of this conversation, it starts to lead children into thinking and working with these emotions. So there is research, active wonder, questioning. There is active engagement with the dissonance, frustration, dissatisfaction that you experience. There is an act of analyzing, putting together this information to actually present in a context which is meaningful, because it's so meaningful to me, I want to present it. And there is constantly figuring out what is it that I can do next and next and next and next. Right? So it may not look like a very innovative space. Sometimes it's a lot about practices. Like for example, in the climate change team, which is called TRUI internally, there's a lot of different practices that they follow, ranging from, okay, let's understand what type of waste needs segregation. Then to a year and a half ago, they figured out that the maximum amount of waste in our school gets generated during their birthdays, where they have wrappers that get thrown out, and there are hundreds of wrappers that get thrown out just because one child decided to bring the chocolates, buy and bring the chocolate to school, and they together took an initiative that they're not going to bring wrapper based chocolates.
Wow.
to school, and that has really reduced the amount of waste being generated, and a lot of creative ways to celebrate birthdays emerged, right? And children are actually innovatively thinking about traditional sweets, about different ways in which they can actually engage with their birthday. The other initiative that emerged was again related to birthdays and chocolates, right? And about the unhealthy aspect of it, and what could be the alternatives that we could actually bring about. And the first time we launched it, we wanted, will children really eschew chocolate on their birthday?
Yeah.
They did. And we are always looking forward many times to the most creative ways in which the children are bringing different kinds of sweets or nuts or dates, or some of them decided not to have any form of sweet on their birthday, and they're thinking about newer ways to engage with each other. And this is beautiful because change making starts with you, right? And then it can extend to a school community,
right,
which is what the children are doing right now, right? Then it can slowly extend into the community spaces where we live.
Okay.
Right? And then it can extend beyond that to a city, to a state, to a world, right? And a lot of the children's work today is starting to expand to the communities where they live. Okay, right? And it's part of that vision that we're actually trying to extend the inspiring confident learners and change makers through the Young Changemakers Summit.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to ask you next. I was wondering that in the space of events for children, if you were to call it that, like events for children, we have seen things like an Olympiad, or let's say like an inter-school competition, a debate competition, those kind of competitive events. Or we have seen things like nowadays there are lots of lit fests, and there are carnivals, and there's a like fete and a summer carnival, those kinds of things. But I don't know, I'm not able to place this summit in either one of those slots. So can you tell those who are watching or listening to us about what is this Young Changemakers Summit?
It's a good question. So Summit in itself stands for a place where like-minded people can come and meet, and they have something common amongst them, right? So we chose the word summit for this event, and if you ask me, it's a mix of lit fest and a competitive event, but at the same time it's neither. Right? Because when you go to a lit fest, you're going there to be inspired and touched by people who have shared their lives and their knowledge so openly in books, right? So that component is there. There is inspiration, and there is going to actually find out more about something. And at the same time, your own interest can be explored in the different mission tracks that we've set up for children. In terms of competitiveness, we are actually redefining it in some ways, right? So we are not competing me versus you, right? And neither is it me versus somebody else, but it is more about me and the world against these problems, right? Because these problems have been created by the me versus you mindset to begin with, right? So if the competition gets a little redefined, saying let's gather, let's get together, so hence summit, right? Let's get together. And figure out what are we up against, right? So that it is neither, it's not a very petty way of saying that okay, I one-upped you in some ways, but it's more about my skill, your skill, our skill can do something more for the world together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So are you hoping that children who attend the summit, do you see them collaborating with the children who are, like you're saying, that in Sparkling Mindz are already working on the mission? Do you see them collaborating with these children and them together doing something? Do you see that?
Yeah. So we've been talking about it, right? What can somebody who is not part of the system already do, even after attending the summit, right? How do they continue to stay in touch? Because none of these missions are get done in one day, done and dusted, I attended something, right? While we are issuing a certificate and we do want the children to feel like they came and attended something, it's about a continual engagement, right? So what we are trying to do right now is our children are taking very small, pragmatic, practical steps in the direction of change making, right? So could be as simple as I learned to cook my own healthy snacks, right? It could be as simple as I gear up towards doing a e-waste campaign in my apartment, right? So we want all of these things that our children are already doing, which anyway is going to touch lives beyond them, to have collaborators outside of the system too. So I do see these children collaborating with our children, and all of these are our children in some ways, right? Collaborating together. I do visualize teachers in other systems collaborating, right? Other schools collaborating on these missions and running massive campaigns in the city, right? Together to solve problems. One person may not be able to solve a problem, but one person is frustrated enough to bring a lot of people together, and together we can solve problems.
So this sounds really wonderful for I don't know, for the world and for everybody who's facing these problems. But one might wonder that what is in it for the children? Like, why should children do this?
It's actually a very good question, right? So these missions, they came to us from the children, right? When they saw news reports of vulnerability of children and children being kidnapped and abused in different ways, they saw a child report of a child helpline where they very clearly stated that out of the 3 crore calls received in the child helpline over a period of a year, 1 crore of them were mute calls. And their question was, ma'am, why are these calls mute? What does it mean? Is somebody afraid to speak? Or is there a prank call? And the article talked about the fact that that call held on for more than a minute to 2 minutes. So it's not a prank call. It's somebody who's made a call, is in need for help and doesn't know what to ask, how to ask, right? So the whole mission of child safety, child rights and child vulnerability emerged from there, right? So we might look at children who are young and think that they don't understand the problems, right? They see it, right? What they don't know is what to do with it, and sometimes the overwhelming is so much that they are given up. They're like, okay, this is what it is, right? And they just want to move ahead without staying with the discomfort, and staying with the discomfort is a difficult thing to do, right? So for children, it is a space where they can come and grapple with those problems that on a day-to-day basis they don't get space and time to address. Right? For children, it is a space to come and ask questions openly about things that people don't typically answer for them. For children, it is a space to come and explore things. Some of them who have really gotten intrigued by the emotional journey and vulnerability. One of the children who've registered, the parent says that they've had a workshop at school, they've spoken about emotions and vulnerability, and this child wants to explore more of that. So they've picked that particular mission for the child. Right? So it seems something that children could do away from the traditional model where we think children just want to play, right? And the thing with us is we don't think play is frivolous either, right? When children play, they are engaging in very serious learning behaviors, and the workshops and the missions that we've set up is also very playful, engaging space. So engaging, immersive space in which they can think about problems bigger than themselves is a space that I think children might be willing to come and explore, and especially parents who are aligned to this whole thinking process, where they understand that this is something children can face in the future, and it is good for them to actually connect with it at this level, can have conversations and dialogues with their children about exploring a space like this.
Right. So I have one more question. You said that play is something serious, it's not seen as frivolous, and you were saying that the sessions also are immersive. So from the brochure, I don't know if anybody saw it, or from the invite, it looks like the sessions are very, for the lack of a better word, but serious topics, right? Like things to know about waste management or things to know about plastic. So I don't know how are these serious things being done playfully?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So it's children in the system who are designing this for the children with the support of the facilitators, right? And they are very mindfully thinking about what would we like to hear, what what would a child really take away from this whole process, right? Now, we can say, oh, plastic problem is a big problem beyond us, but think about it, right? A decade or 2 decades ago, most of the toys that our children played with were made of wood, right? Today it's all made of plastic, right? So plastic is not something that is way beyond our children's comprehension, even very young children's comprehension, right? Battery operated toys are all over the place, right? For them, so for them to understand that, oh, where is this battery going, or how is it working, it can be at a very bare level, right? That this does add to waste in the world, and do you know what kind of waste? I'll give you a very interesting example, right? There's this 4-year-old child, and I'm talking to this child about food and junk food and everything, and he says, why is it junk? So I was explaining to him that there are things in it like maida and sugar, right, which makes it unhealthy for our body. So why is maida unhealthy? Right? So when you talk to a child about something contextual that they connect with in their day-to-day lives, there is scope for them to try and understand more in a non-pedantic way. So it's not being said in a, oh, you should do this or you shouldn't do this, right? It is about, what, this is what we've discovered, or this is what we've found, and this is where it's leading to, and did you know about this, right? And have you seen this around? And they're like, yeah, we've seen this, right? So when that connection happens, it's a very respectful space in which a very serious topic gets discussed, and the child really feels like they're involved in that journey, which becomes more experiential and immersive for them.
So to be part of something like this, what would you say that the child needs? Does the child need to have done something, or does the child need to be a certain kind of child? Like, we know that usually it is thought that very high achieving children, like, okay, marks are in place, so they can do something beyond themselves, because pehle khud to theek, they have to be okay themselves, and then they can think about something. So is there anything like that you would say that the summit recommends? Or
yeah, I think this is interesting. So when we're talking about who might come to this summit, right, we talked about 2-3 kinds of children, right? One would be somebody who is who's heard about these problems, is not very sure what role are they playing, should they be really concerned about it. The parent really thinks it's important, and together they have this dynamic of wanting to come, right? Another one could be, that the child is not yet seeing anything, but the parent really thinks it is important, and this becomes a space for the child to come and explore, whether fully reluctantly or not, right? But once they come in, we are hoping that our children's enthusiasm and excitement gets them to think and stay with the problem. We also have space for children to explore different missions, so just in case somebody is not yet on one track, right, they could do that. The third one, which is a child who is really passionate and has been doing some work and has been reading up on things and has really worked on something, like write an article, write a blog, do some work in their community, or has participated in other workshops, would be an excellent fit, right? Having said that, the parent needs to understand that academics is not the only thing that needs to get set for a child, right? In the current context of where our children are, the complicated context that they are in, they are living and breathing the same air, the same news, right? The same social media that we are all living and breathing. It's not like 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? So it's not possible to unentangle in some ways the realities of today with their education. The education has not completely kept track with the realities of today, and the way it is interfacing also seems very intellectual, right? So the experience of how a change in the world outside will shift me is also very powerful for a child, and it cannot wait for all the academics to get set. In fact, by the time all the academics and everything gets set, right, the value systems and the way they handle the emotions and mindset has also gotten set in a certain way, right? So then to undo all of that is a lot of unlearning to do. We have at Sparkling Mindz always followed a philosophy, more holistic approach, where there is academics and there is the thinking beyond self, there is emotions. Nobody is perfect. I don't think we're trying to strive towards an utopia, right? It is about everything kind of walking in hand for a more wholesome experience of your journey in life. So I would recommend that we don't wait for everything to get set. For children to get exposed to such problems, or even B, for children to come and think of themselves as change makers, not even start the journey, but even just think of themselves as change makers. Because we've seen when children think of themselves as change makers, their decision making starts to shift, and you can hold a lot of personal decisions, accountability on personal decisions at a much more higher standard of excellence, just because they're not just fighting a very small battle. They're actually looking at a much bigger landscape of how what they do impacts everybody beyond them. And that's a very high leverage thing to do.
Can you give an example of how being, say, I believe I'm a change, or a child believes that I'm a change maker? How does that, say, impact a day-to-day decision making of the child?
Yeah, I think let's take something very simple like doing your work, right, which needs practice and needs work.
Like, say, do your chores, that kind of work?
Chores, your own homework, or arrange or organize your space, right? At the level of change or organize your space alone, it is a battle of mother or father versus the child.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, and the child gets to throw all kinds of tantrums, right, or commit and not do it, right? But the moment you're talking about, you are responsible for not just your home space, you're responsible for a much larger problem that we are facing in this world, because people don't organize, we don't segregate, people don't do things, right? The child immediately is able to shift and understand that me doing this builds a skill for me to do something better. Right? Oh, and the other way around also works. Because the child is doing a lot of segregation and management at a different level and taking responsibility and ownership, when space is created at home, and that's very critical, right? If parents see the child as a baby unable to do it, right, that space is not created. When the space is created at home, this ownership translates back at home too. Without, very effortlessly actually. So at school, we have this terminology of being a mindless consumer versus a thinking creator, and our very, very young ones actually, use that terminology with themselves. I'm like watching Gadget, right? Are you being a mindless consumer? No, I want to be a thinking creator, right? And I will time myself and I will do this, right? So me being a thinking creator is important, not just for me but beyond me. So I will choose it. Otherwise, what happens is I can say, oh, I don't want to be a thinking creator today because it's for me, right? But you are responsible for beyond you starts to shift things in children, right? And hence the summit.
So I think like you are, and school is, and the summit is definitely recognizing the need for children to engage with this kind of work, to be change makers, to work on, say, these missions beyond themselves. Do you think the world is recognizing it? Like, would something like is something like this valuable on an application letter or a statement of purpose? Are universities looking for this, recognizing it? But do you think employers are looking for this, recognizing this?
I think that's a very pertinent question at this point, right? So we've been engaging with a lot of university, counselors. We've been engaging with people who are supporting children in creating their statement of purpose and essays and enabling them to transition into higher education. And one thing which stands out, right, is that each one of them is looking for people who have come alive. Everybody is looking at somebody who's come alive, and one of the most beautiful ways in which people come alive is with a sense of purpose, right? It is where a passion meets a problem, right? Where a purpose intersects, right? And the higher education then can serve the purpose through the skill development that they provide, right? So the person recruiting them into that university also is very clear that this child will carve a path for themselves and they contribute to the world. And contribution has become a very key term even in corporates and jobs and everywhere, right? Nobody wants somebody who is a mindless consumer and who puts their hobby as watching YouTube on their profile, right? Nobody would hire such a person. For us, that's a very clear passive activity. It is not an active activity. Whereas a child puts, I do a podcast on climate change and I've been talking to 10,000 children over the last 3 years, right? Somebody would hire that person a heartbeat, even if that person is 16 years old. Right? And for these children to start their work on networking and looking at, which places I need to belong to in many ways, which is a very important thing for Gen Z, way more than millennials at this point, right? Gen Z, that they want to belong and they want to have a culture which actually supports their views and gives them access to grow. These are all very important things for them. So in order for that to happen, they having clarity or a sense of purpose can enable them to connect to those tribes. Right? And people out there are looking for people like that. Like today we're looking for people who are savvy in marketing, right? Savvy in people connections, right? People in networking, right? And I wouldn't even bother to look at their age or their credentials if they've achieved something massively and they can prove their sense of purpose.
Yes.
Right? And I'm sure that's true about most people today, right? But the more and more people walk the traditional fear-based path, it is not enabling you to switch. These are like two parallel universes.
Yeah.
So the more you're fear-based driven that, I have to do everything right and I have to have these credentials, right? There is no space to explore the sense of purpose or engage with the dissonance or the problem or maybe fail trying to attempt to do something, right? And it's something that we also think about, right? We are launching the summit and there's a chance that nobody will show up, right? Because nobody's done something like this before, right? But should we not take that chance? That's what actually.
So with the coming back to the Young Changemakers Summit, so the Young Changemakers Summit is happening on December 23rd and 24th, and this is for children, all children, any child can attend this?
Yes. So our children unanimously said every child across the world should have access to these problems, and we should not be thinking about this as something that only we can do. So they are inviting every single child out there. Right now we're starting with 10 to 16-year-olds, and anybody slightly younger who really feels they want to connect to this mission, welcome, please do write in to us to come and be part of these missions.
So while we're on the subject of purpose and living life purposefully, there's also a panel discussion that's happening on the second day, right, which is about purposeful career choices for young change makers. So can you tell us a little about that?
Okay, so this is actually a very offbeat idea, right? Because parents are like, experiential learning is all good, right? Learn all good, but at the end of the day, where do they have to go, right? They have to go work in these same places, which don't believe in purpose and all that, right? I think at 3 levels, right? Change is coming. Right, it's coming to the whole world, right? India happens to be at the forefront of it, right? In the less than next 10 years, India is going to be a global economy to reckon with, a top global economy, top 3 global economy to reckon with, and that's not just saying the least of what is going to happen, right? What does a global economy need from its people, right? It needs people who can think. It needs people who are unafraid of challenging status quo. It needs people who can execute that like there was no tomorrow, right? And it needs people who will challenge that status quo again. Like it's just like they don't go to sleep, right? Because the moment you go to sleep on something, you're not a global economy anymore, right? And that challenging of status quo comes from questioning, comes from learning, right? Comes from thinking. So all of those skills are essential, and why we added the change making to begin with in our mission statement, right? Vision statement was so that children begin to see that the work that you're putting in needs to translate at a global scale, at a different scale, right? And so that's the first thing, that change is coming, and we have to be prepared, right? The second thing, which is I think a very interesting space, is that the world increasingly, it may not seem that way because of the news and everything, but in the millennia of our existence, right, the world is the most peaceful ever. Right? Neither are we at a threat of a war, nor does it. We can all kill each other at the snap of a button, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen, right? People are all exercising a lot of prudence, way more than somebody in the past executed, right? With such peace comes a lot of prosperity and a lot of abundance and a lot of space for people to think and do something different, right? Which is not being utilized by our children today. If they continue operating in the same method of, I will study, I'll get a degree, somebody will give me a job, right? And I will just hold on to that job and do whatever is needed, right? That's a I think that's a 3-generation old model, right? It has not worked neither in our generation nor in the generation that's going to come, right? It's not going to work. So what is a better model, right? Is to think about, okay, how can I do the best that I can in every situation that I'm in? I find a sense of purpose or passionate path that I want to take. I understand more about it. I find ways to contribute to it. I see if I'm successful, able to build skill, does it meet my soulful needs or not? Skip to something else, maybe do something else, but again find a sense of depth and sense of purpose in it, but keep going.
Yeah.
And that's the way. In the scheme of things, people ask us two pertinent questions. Okay, one, it increasingly looks like it is an entrepreneurship based model, right?
Which is what I was thinking.
And I tell people that it's an entrepreneurial mindset. To be able to look at what is it that needs work, needs my effort, and is it the highest leverage work that I can put in? Right? Always asking yourself that question enables you to keep growing and keep contributing at your highest potential, and drive towards excellence rather than towards perfectionism, which then is all about an image that you're portraying to somebody else, right? Which is going to change the world in different ways. When a generation of children graduate wanting to be excellent at what they do and do something that pulls at their hearts and their souls strings, right? So it's an entrepreneurial mindset, it's a change-making attitude. It could be anywhere. It could be anywhere, and the world is increasingly celebrating, and that brings me to the third point. The world is increasingly celebrating people who are creating change. If you look at the top 10 entrepreneurs on the list of Forbes top 10 or top 10 billionaires, right? Each one of them disrupted a status quo, achieved something amazing, right? It is not coming from the traditional let's mine something, let's push something mindset, right? So if our children are not doing it, then they're working for somebody who's doing it. Even then, they will need to think differently, because that industry is not going to cater to mindless consumption, right? So whether you're becoming an entrepreneur, whether you're working for an entrepreneur, right? Whether you're working for a change maker, you're working for a largish company which is probably creating something, there is a need for this kind of a thinking everywhere. Right? So the kind of career choices our children are going to have in front of them will increasingly look very, very aligned to them being able to do this work, right? On a top level, it may not look very different. I'm not saying that the names of the careers are going to shift significantly, right? The job, it is a very gradual shift that will happen.
So you might still be a CEO and you might still be a communications manager.
Yes, but what you do in that context, the empathy that you bring in that context, the way you connect in that context will have to shift. Because the old models are not going to work anymore, right? So children need this, and they also need to see an evolving panel of people choosing this path, moving in that direction. Somebody who's tangible and accessible to them, who's made a different decision, right? So hence we're kickstarting a series of panel discussions, starting with the Young Changemakers Summit on purpose-based career choices. And we have a lot of mission collaborators who are willing to come and spend that time to explain to children, work with children, share with children how this works and why this is something that they could aspire to move towards. They don't have to operate out of fear that, oh my God, all of this is great, but I need to focus on, marks and only then. The thing is, when a child grows up to think of themselves as somebody who's contributing to this world with their whole being, the marks falls in place, because it's an outcome of a skill of learning that is developed, right? And when that is done, when the skill of learning developed results in the marks, that causality is set right. That the child can go learn something else too, right? People who go out, children who've gone out of our system, write back to us saying that, you know what, I may not be doing well right away, but I know how to get there, and that makes me at peace, because I know I tweak this, I tweak that, and I'm learning how to get better at it. I'm learning how to manage the system, and that's important.
Yes, absolutely.
So we are hoping that's what children see in that panel discussion, of people who've walked passionate path, purposeful path, doing well, right? Managing teams which are also passionate, and then them talking about what do we look for in a team that we hire, right? And how we made these choices and these decisions. At the end of the day, everything is about a portfolio, right? You're managing your risk in some way against a reward, right? And here the reward is more than just money. There is money, which we are showcasing to children that there is money. There's also the social impact and the environmental impact and all of it coming together for them to see, I don't have to destroy environment to be successful. I don't have to destroy communities and local culture and people's mental health to be successful in life, right? And that's
that old model of if you need to be successful or famous, then you need to sell your soul, and if you need to do something soulful, then you need to be okay with living in a kutia or that kind of thing, because you're doing soul work. But what you're saying is it doesn't have to be like that. Like, it doesn't have to be it has to be purpose versus career.
Right.
Or
And I
success.
think that if in 10 years somebody is not asking that question, we would have succeeded. Right? That can you create impact and make money too? Can my child create impact and make money too? Our benchmark for success should be that somebody doesn't ask that question. They're like, we've seen children do it. We've seen people walk that path, right? Would be a good benchmark for success.
Yeah, but for now, what we're saying is start with the panel discussion where children need to see, like earlier you were talking about the stories and the fairy tales, and how children are if they're only seeing examples of a certain kind of black and white or a narrow way of living life, or I have to be brave and failure is not okay. So they need to see living, breathing examples of people who are living with purpose but happy and successful and really inspired about what they're doing, to be able to even start thinking about aspiring to have careers like that. So that sounds good. What I was thinking is that
this reminds me of something, okay, that education should be about enabling children to develop their sense of agency and their voice, right? And that's the exact opposite that happens. By the time a child has passed through a system, they're very clear that their voice doesn't matter and they have no agency of this world, and this world is doomed to whatever, what is going to happen is going to happen, right? And I can't do anything about it, right? That's the worst outcome that you can actually hope to expect in an educational setting, right? So when we are walking them on this path, showing them this panel discussion, etc., if they can see that their voice can matter, their sense of agency kind of starts to get developed, we've gifted them something beautiful in that journey.
So exactly. So the panel discussion itself, I think, is a related question that I was asking. Is that the way it needs to be, because the panelists are such and the theme is such, it obviously can't be somewhere where somebody's coming and showing them a PowerPoint presentation on this is how it happens, this is what you need to do, and a very clear-cut step-by-step process. It obviously can't be like that, because what you said is that there's a path that they walk and it's very dynamic, they have to keep staying alive. So how do you think the format will support the panelists that are there? And the second thing is what you were saying about the children having voice and agency. How will the panel discussion be conducted such that children can have voice and agency?
Right. So it's an open conversation. So we'll have a moderator, and the moderator is enabling children's voices that are gathered over the next 2 weeks, right, to reach the panelists. So the questions are curated from the children who are going to be participating and the children who are part of the system, and we will ensure that the panelists are engaging sufficiently deeply in the most practical way with the children. And one of the things that we follow with anybody who interacts with children at our place is that we don't dumb down anything for children, right? It's shared in the most authentic and relatable way so that children can connect to it, but it is the most deepest, widest form of truth that can be offered in some ways, right? There is also a space for children to ask questions and connect with the panelists. We've kept sufficient time for that kind of an interaction to happen, and hence there are limited seats in the summit at this point. But on an ongoing basis, we are hoping to take this whole panel discussion hybrid and virtual, and for a lot more people to join in and connect with this. We are also expecting parents to join us on the panel discussion and ask questions. The idea for this panel discussion, by the way, now that I think about it, emerged from our previous interaction, which was inspired by Human Library. We had something called a Book of Life that we held on November 12th in connection with Children's Day for our community. And one of them who had quit a career, like a hefty paying career, to follow photography and wildlife kind of a travel career path, said that many parents, when they spoke to him, he sensed fear in their eyes, I would want my child to do this, but will this really pay my child's bills, and will this really take care of his all his needs and his family's needs in the future, right? And it stayed with us, it's true, parents are worried, and it's a real apprehension, right? And hence the panel discussion is exactly answering that question, right? Will this pay our bills? And more, right?
So like you're saying, I'm sure parents, like children might have also questions, but parents might also, I'm seeing parents might have a lot of questions that they would probably want to ask the panelists or just want to understand. So you did say that parents can attend the panel discussion. So basically, children can attend the first day, and the second day, parents can also attend the panel discussion.
With the children, yes.
And if parents have questions, could they send it? Could they ask?
Yes. So there are ways that we would be collecting. Once they register on the website, we will be sending them a selection email, the children who get selected for the process. We have very minimal selection criteria, but we are looking for children who are definitely in some way interested, passionate, parents who are interested to take this as a journey forward, right? And somebody who wants to explore and figure out a space amongst these missions. Once they register, they get a selection email, and in the email there is a way for them to contact us and share questions that we will share with them. And we are really looking forward to them coming, engaging, and figuring out if they have more questions that they would like to ask too.
Okay, thank you.